The families of victims of apartheid-era human rights violations have written to the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Shamila Batohi, requesting the public release of Advocate Dumisa Ntsebeza SC's report into the National Prosecuting Authority's handling of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission cases. In January this year, Ntsebeza was given 3 months to review the NPA's measures to deal with and prosecute TRC cases, as well as provide recommendations if necessary. In the letter dated 11 October 2023, the families say that they were encouraged by the appointment of Advocate Ntsebeza SC. However, months later, they're yet to see the fruits of this process. The families, who are assuming that the report has been concluded by now, say that its release is essential to uphold the principles of transparency and justice, rebuilding trust in the NPA and ensuring public accountability. The victims' loved ones further state that widespread access to the report's findings and recommendations would allow them and the general public to hold the NPA accountable for the implementation of these recommendations. As a result, the families are requesting the release of the report of the public by the end of October 2023. All right, we are now joined by Dr. Zaid Kimmie, the Executive Director at the Foundation for Human Rights. Dr. Kimmie, a warm welcome to you and thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, Dr. Kimmie, are you of the view that, the NPA may have erred in how it handled TRC cases? Of course, I would imagine that the report would give us, more information and shed more light on that. But I mean, it's not, in all honesty, it's not the first time, that we hear, these sort of complaints about, how the NPA should have or could have handled it.
Yeah, well, let's be clear that Advocate Ntsebeza's work, the main task he was asked to focus on was to review the measures that had been put in place since about 2019 to reform the NPA and the measures they'd taken to prioritize the TRC cases. It's accepted that after the TRC had concluded its work, it's generally accepted that there had been a period where various parties, including the NPA, the government of South Africa, had failed to prosecute the cases that they should have prosecuted. And I don't think Advocate Ntsebeza was necessarily going to comment on the historical delays, but he was being asked to review the measures that had just been put in place and to assess how effective those measures had been.
And what's the expectation then, from, the report? And I do understand that, he was to also give some sort of, recommendations on how things should or could have been handled. Well, what are we expecting?
Well, we don't know, and that is precisely why I think the families and their various the organizations that are supporting them are asking that the report be released. Because it's important to know exactly what he found and what sort of recommendations he has made, and if there were areas where he believed the NPA could improve, then he would have pointed those out. And it's in the public interest that that information be shared and that we collectively, the families, organizations and the public in general, hold the NPA to account and ensure that they implement those recommendations where possible.
Yeah. And speaking of, the measures put in place that, of course, we seek for Ntsebeza's comment on or report on, the NPA did in January release a statement stipulating that, it had indeed taken important steps to enhance efforts to deal with and to prosecute cases that were stemming from the TRC. And I think some of the examples that they gave there was, the reopening of cases and pursuing some of those priority cases. And certainly we've seen, some of that happening. Is this not some way in which the NPA has sought to, address the issue? And I'm not defending the NPA here, but isn't this a way, of them actually trying to work ahead?
I think any progress is welcome. And I don't think we should necessarily just be critical of the NPA.
Yeah.
I think some of the measures that they have put in place, the identification of specialized prosecutors and investigators, are a step forward. But, a step forward is to be welcomed, and it's good. But the question we always want to ask is it enough? Can we do more?
Yeah.
It's not enough just to say that progress is being made or that this or that case is being seen to. And again, I don't want to be overly critical of the NPA.
Yeah.
But the question we have to ask is not just, are we making progress at all, which would be, a huge improvement from what went before, but are we making the right sort of progress? Are we making the right sort of decisions? Are we putting sufficient resources into what is being done? Those are the questions that have to be answered.
Yeah, just taking from what you said that, you're not being overly critical of the NPA. Perhaps let's do the opposite and perhaps play devil's advocate, if one will. What may have prevented the NPA if they didn't do such a good job, if it wasn't enough? What could have possibly prevented the NPA from doing, a thorough job, at the time? What could have stopped them?
Well, I think that is a question. It seems fairly clear that there was some form of political interference.
Okay.
But we don't know all of the details. I think I can say, without fear of contradiction, that it's generally accepted that there was political interference. Mm-hmm. There was an instruction not to prosecute these cases. And what that means is that even though we've made progress now, we've had a number of inquests that have been completed.
Yeah.
But all of those inquests have been completed and the people responsible have died.
Yeah.
There's no one left to prosecute. And so, we're in this an enviable position where we're running out of time and we making progress with cases only where there's no further prospect of prosecution.
Yeah.
So that's not a great situation.
And I'm glad you raised that because there's been this perception, and I suppose it's after people woke up from the euphoria of the Rainbow Nation, forgive and forget, all of that. There's a sense that the forgiveness was granted preceding any form of apology or retribution. And as you rightly say, could we say it's too late actually at this point for the victims of apartheid atrocities to seek that justice, given the fact that there was no sense of retribution really?
Well, there was a process that was set in place, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission process. And there were large numbers of people who were granted amnesty for, fairly severe human rights abuses, up to and including murder.
Yeah.
So people were granted amnesty. I think the agreement that was made was that if amnesty wasn't granted, and if people didn't apply for amnesty, the state had an obligation to prosecute those cases. Those fell outside of the reconciliation process. And what has happened, the issue that we're grappling with, is that there were several hundred of these cases that were passed on to the NPA, and no action was taken. And it was deliberate. It was a decision not to take any action. We still need to get to the bottom of that. As I said, Advocate Ntsebeza's brief was not to understand why political or what sort of interference happened or who was responsible. That was not his brief. That is a question that still has to be answered. And we have to answer that question because it's at the heart of our democracy, that we have a rule of law, and when people commit crimes, they have to be investigated and, where possible, prosecuted. And if they are not prosecuted, we need to know why they were not prosecuted.
All right, Dr. Zaid, we really appreciate your input on the show. Thank you very much to you, Dr. Zaid Kimmie, who's the Executive Director at the Foundation for Human Rights.